Weddings are fantastic. They're this rare opportunity to step out of the day-to-day and say to someone, hey, I kind of like you. We've been videographers in the wedding industry here on Vancouver Island for over 10 years now. And one of the most common things we hear from couples and other vendors who want to plan a sustainable event is, I'd love to, but I just don't know how.
So in this series, we're going to explore how to actually have a sustainable event. And with help from vendors all over Vancouver Island and across the wedding industry, we'll talk about how to create and celebrate a sustainable wedding from the planning stages to the footprint that's left behind. From the big picture to the small details, we'll provide tips and tricks for how to get you sustainably wed.
We really love filming weddings, and we've been doing it for more than a decade now. As filmmakers, you really couldn't ask for a day with more emotion and meaning and stories to capture. But we also know that the wedding industry as a whole can have a pretty significant negative impact on the environment. And the more we made changes in our personal lives, the more we started to see things that really needed addressing within the wedding industry. The good news is there are so many ways to make weddings more sustainable. And a lot of those things are already happening here on Vancouver Island and around the world. So we decided we wanted to share these sustainable practices and ideas with couples. And that's how this series came to be. The first thing we did was send out a questionnaire to vendors across the industry, and we asked them for their advice on planning a sustainable event. And to be honest, I was pretty surprised by some of the answers. The answer we heard most often wasn't a specific task, like don't use floral foam or rent decor rather than buying it online. Those things came up, sure, but the thing we heard most often was something much deeper than that. And when you have a deep question you want answered, there's only one person to go to.
We started this process by reaching out to vendors and couples and asking them, what is a sustainable wedding and what does that look like? What does it mean? And how can you pull one off? And we heard back from a lot of different vendors and couples who have already been married that the biggest piece of advice they would give is to start that process from a place of intention and meaning and to put your values first. And that's a big ask, actually. And so I'm turning to you, Barbara Densmore, as an expert. Can you tell us what it means to put intention and meaning and values at the heart of your wedding planning?
Yes, I can.
Good.
Just watch me.
Barbara is a celebrant who creates these incredible wedding ceremonies. She brings so much thought and love and meaning to every event that it's really hard to make it through one of her ceremonies without crying and laughing and smiling and sometimes all of those things all at once. So if there's one person who knows how to celebrate meaningfully, it's Barbara.
We're getting to a point now where we understand that we're looking for something more than a party. Mm-hmm. Over the years, we've become a party culture. We know how to throw a party. Mm-hmm. But we also know that when it comes to like a vista moment in life, and there aren't a lot of them, mm-hmm. but when a vista moment comes, that a party doesn't quite cut it. We need something more. Mm-hmm. And that's where intention comes in. And that's where meaning comes in. And so we're looking for something beyond the celebration to give us a sense of connection to each other, to what's going on in the world, even to ourselves, making more sense of what's happening, feeling more grounded. Mm-hmm. So, but we don't know how. A lot of the time we don't know how to approach those moments. Ritual almost sounds like a dirty word, but it's not. Ritual means that we're doing something meaningful.
Right.
So our head, our heart, and our hands are all together.
Cool.
So I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking to try and take those meaningful actions to mark what is an incredible, pivotal moment in time, but we just don't know how to do it. This is about finding what matters to you, what's meaningful for you, and making it work. So this is about making that moment, that day, be an expression of yourself. And that's what intentional and meaningful is for me.
After chatting with Barbara, we really grabbed onto this idea that in order to have a sustainable wedding, really need to align your vision for the day with your priorities and your values as a couple. And so before we start in on the more tangible tips and tricks that we'll get to throughout the rest of the series, that's what we wanted to explore in this first episode, aligning your vision and your values. And I wanted to get some advice from a wedding planner on how to actually do this in practice. So I connected with Natasha at Clearwater Events.
So the way I always start my very first consultation is really about trying to figure out what your priorities are as a couple. So I always suggest 3 to 4 at a maximum, but I come up from a perspective of what's important in your daily life. So are you a foodie? Do you love going out to all the local restaurants, checking out that scene? Are you like me and you're a design junkie? You love stationery and all things paper. Do you love florals and always have bouquets in your home? Like, think about what those are in your daily life, and then we can shift those to your wedding. And then maybe use those priorities to then add in some sustainability initiatives into your wedding itself. And I find if we start with that baseline, it also keeps us really grounded throughout the process as well.
Natasha isn't only a wedding planner, she also runs a program called The Good Green, which helps businesses incorporate sustainable practices. And so she's the perfect person to ask that all-important question, how much is a sustainable wedding actually going to cost me?
I think one thing we struggle with in the sustainable wedding space is trying to figure out, is it more costly? The number one question I get is, well, sustainable weddings are just more costly. I can't afford to do it. And what I would say to you is, if you figure out what your priorities are and really come back to those priorities throughout the planning process, we can focus on those things and maybe let a couple of other things slide by the wayside, knowing that this is your budget, these are the parameters that we have to work with, and these are our sort of house ground rules as we move forward.
I love the idea of setting a few key priorities to guide your planning. And that's actually something we heard from a lot of other vendors as well. Caitlin is a wedding planner and owner of Vow & Co, and she really echoed Natasha's advice.
I always tell my couples, whether or not sustainability is a top of mind for them, I always let them know before you start the planning journey. I want you both independently to think about 3 things that you both want on your day. It could be a band, it could be we want 20 minutes just alone after the ceremony. Whatever that is, I want them to think about that. Write it down, put it in a safe spot. So as you're going and planning, on that planning journey, you're always coming back to, okay, wait a minute. We don't need this. We're just feeling overwhelmed by what there is coming our way now that we've opened up the can of worms of wedding planning. Right. And so you're always going back to your original thoughts of how you want your day to be. And I think it lends itself perfectly to sustainability because that was your original intention.
Right. What that touches on, I think, is really important is that often we think about sustainability in a wedding and we think about it in terms of sacrifice. What am I going to have to give up to have a sustainable day? And is it going to compromise the vision? But the way you're saying it is that really we're just recentering ourselves on our priorities. Yes. It's not that we're giving up our priorities, it's that we're coming back to those. And that's what's going to help us be more sustainable. So you're not sacrificing anything. Does that make sense?
For sure. I think it's really tricky because as a newly engaged couple, you're faced with so many questions. And those questions all have good intentions from your friends and family members, but it can lead you to feel overwhelmed by the possibilities or the things you think you need, and the wedding checklists and the Pinterest and all of those things. But just scaling it back and thinking about what it is that we truly want as a couple will ultimately help us to find our way in a more authentic way. And your celebration will be better for it because it will be your story and not a wedding that you want to recreate because it looks really beautiful.
Aligning your vision and values sounds easy, kind of, but there are a lot of logistical things to consider. Like if you're picturing your wedding and it includes sunflowers, say, but your wedding is in April, for example, how do you align your vision for the day with the fact that sunflowers just don't grow on Vancouver Island in that month? I went over to spend the afternoon with Natalia of Apothecary Florals to talk about how to better align those things.
I think the first thing that we all just need to acknowledge is that thinking sustainably, planning a sustainable wedding and how that looks like in terms of floral design, this is a privilege. you know, like this is one of the biggest privileges that exists right now in the world today. So we have to come from a place of acknowledging that first and foremost.
Chatting with Natalia in her studio is just the most wonderful and relaxing way to spend a few hours. While she was working, I asked her how a florist can help a couple realize their vision.
I think that just understanding the overall essence of their vision is really, really important. So going back to sunflowers, maybe they have a personal connection, or they're important to their family or something like that, or maybe they just really love yellow. Right. So there are plenty of other options that are seasonal in May that we could look at using if they're open to it. And I think just focusing more on essence and color palette is really, really the direction I like to go when putting together a proposal or discussing the vision with a client. And I think less focus on the specific types of flowers, right, and just more focus on just the colors.
I think for some couples too, you know, if you have that very specific vision of sunflowers are really important to me. If someone has set that as a value ahead of time, as you know, this is a main priority for our wedding, could they just maybe choose to get married in the month that sunflowers are
I think
in bloom?
That's really the what needs to be the end decision. They need to decide ultimately what their priorities are. And yes, if sunflowers are important to them, I got married in June because I love peonies. And I this was 8 years ago, and I really wanted those to be included in my wedding. And so I intentionally chose a date where I knew they were sort of towards the end of the season, but they'd likely still be available. And to be perfectly honest, even if you do get married right in the middle of the season that your flower might be blooming, the last couple of years have really shown us that nothing's a guarantee, so we're working with a perishable product. We're working with various weather conditions, heat waves, flooding, there are a lot of things that are impacting our ability to obtain items that we might normally have been able to around that same time. So while your florist will do their very, very best, even if you choose to get married in July or August when it's sunflower season, August, every flowers are a gamble, and that's one of the beautiful things about them, Coming from a place of just being really in tune with your environment and what's going on for you would be my second step, and determining what your priorities are. So like we discussed, if there's a type of flower that you're really interested in working with, being mindful of when that's blooming and looking to incorporate all the other beautiful things that are also in season around that time. So whether that extends to your food, your venue, all of those things you can tie in. There are just so many beautiful things that I think if we really stop and we're more in tune with our surroundings, that we can really welcome in, and ultimately it gives our guests a more enjoyable experience and aligns our event with our own values too.
So there are a lot of big decisions to make, for sure. And I wanted to get a perspective from a couple who's actually making those decisions right now. So I connected with Persia and Brad, who are getting married very soon.
It's in June, so it's 105 days or
around
something
that, yeah.
Point. Yeah, I'm totally fine until we hit 2 digits.
Yeah, that's true.
Then it becomes real.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it's real. That's it.
Yeah, so you two have been wedding planning for a little while now. If you think back to when you were kind of starting your planning, how, between the two of you, did you figure out what your biggest priorities for the day were going to be?
I think so. When we started out, we had gone back and forth between do we want to elope or do we want to have an actual wedding? He was a little more team elope, I was more team wedding. And I think we kind of came to a compromise where we're not going to have a huge wedding, but we'll just have just the people that we care about. So family and friends were a priority to have them there. I didn't want to get married without the people that we love there. And then I think the next one was the ceremony location, because for us, we're more excited for the ceremony than the reception. And then it also came down to food. So what was the catering situation when it came to the reception venue? Because we wanted a vegan wedding, so we had to make sure that whatever place we picked either had like a caterer that could do that kind of menu, or we could bring someone in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was a big thing for priorities for me is actually something my parents told me. And they just kind of said, like, when you're thinking about details and you're stressing about stuff, just ask yourself, like, am I going to care about this in 10 years?
Something Persia and Brad told me they realized along the way is that aligning their priorities and the logistics of the day wasn't always easy. And they found they needed to get a little creative with some of the planning.
So we were trying to solve this, like, this Rubik's Cube of, like, we wanted to get a vegan dinner, but that was actually, like, good and satisfying, but also fell inside of a price point, and that was more of a puzzle than I think we had anticipated.
Yeah.
But we solved it. We figured it out.
So yeah, we ended up going with a local Indian restaurant, and the reason we chose Indian food is one, because it's delicious.
Yeah, like, have you ever had bad pakora in your life?
No, I don't think it exists.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of our friends that we told them, like, we're having a vegan wedding, we're doing Indian food, like, a lot of them were, like, super excited about that, so.
Looking forward to your wedding is one thing, but looking back on it is a whole other thing. So I invited our friends Derek and Lindsay over to chat about their wedding. They've been married 6 years, and they've been working in the industry a long time as well.
Being in the wedding industry, we kind of knew, like, being privy to hundreds of weddings over the last 10 years, we kind of knew what was important to us. The elements from other people's weddings were like, yes, we have to have that. So we kind of were able to pick and choose the things that were meaningful and focus on that. And our big focus was the people that were there.
Yeah.
Like, they're there and having a good time. We're happy because we were going to have a good time no matter what. So that was our biggest priority, was making sure we had the elements for everyone to enjoy themselves.
Nice. Did you ever feel along the planning process like you had to compromise that vision to make a sustainable choice?
No, because they're not mutually exclusive.
Nice.
Right? Sustainability is fun. Having fun can be sustainable. So it doesn't really, we didn't miss out on anything. Because the most important thing were the people.
Yeah.
And then you have your food and you have your drinks. But it was all about the people. So if they were all able to show up and happy and healthy, that was like the biggest thing for us. And so, that was the number one priority for us.
Have you noticed that incredible arrangement from Natalia on our table? I promise you our dining room does not typically look that good. Derek and Lindsay did a lot of cool things that really tied their personalities and sustainability together, and their florals and centerpieces were actually one of those things.
Yeah, I guess we both decided that we didn't want a lot of florals, so we decided to do, for table centerpieces, we decided to do succulents.
Nice.
In little...
we thrifted different, like, glass containers, tin containers around town. We love thrifting anyways. We thrift a lot of our clothing, so it just like, I'll pick up a shirt and a cute little glass jar.
Nice.
And so we built these up, and then we actually gave some to friends and family at the event, and we have most of them at home still, scattered around our house, and then have potted them as well outside, and they've grown and flourished. So that was really fun, because we had something, we can have this forever.
Yeah.
We get, a piece of our wedding kind of lives on. And also at the time of the year too, October isn't like full of local flowers. And so we didn't want to have to like bring in a lot of stuff that wasn't local and sustainable at that particular time of year.
Sure.
And so, it's funny because I don't even know if we thought about it so much while we were doing it, because it's just kind of how we try and live our life.
Right.
So it just seems to be it should be a natural extension of who you are at your wedding, not something that's not you.
If you're watching this and thinking, will any of these choices really have an impact? I think it's important to stop here and say yes. Your choices on your wedding day definitely have an impact, and it can actually be a really big one. It's tempting to think, look, it's just one day. I make great environmental choices the rest of the time, so I just want to forget about it just this once. But actually, a wedding day can have an environmental footprint that's equivalent to years or even decades of your day-to-day life. And when you consider just how many of them happen around the globe every year, it really adds up. In Australia, a group called Less Stuff, More Meaning calculated that if even 10% of weddings there made changes and cut down their footprint, it would be equivalent to taking 100,000 cars off the road per year. Now, I'm not saying you have to get married barefoot in a field or switch out your wedding cake for carrots you grew in your backyard. I'm not saying you need to uninvite a bunch of people or cancel the flowers, send back the dress. And I'm definitely not saying that you can't even have a beautiful, elegant, or even luxurious wedding. But what we did hear from vendors again and again is that even small choices can add up to make a big difference.
People think it's an all or nothing thing. You know, we often, and I'm guilty of this, you know, if I'm not making huge changes, then I'm not making a difference at all. And I've seen firsthand that small, tiny changes in your life, in your business, with your family, they make a huge impact. So even if your wedding flowers or your food or whatever it is that you're thinking about isn't 100% local, 100% sustainable, those small little changes that you've made, those mindful changes are enormous. And if everybody did that, the impact would be so significant.
This is a lot to take in, but when you hear from people who've been working at weddings for years, some parts of the process start to feel a little easier.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, because I think it's really all about the people. I think we're starting to realize that it's all about the people. It's not, you know, in our lives, it's not so much about the stuff. It's not so much about, you know, any of the tangibles as much as it is about being together. I think I would say go back and look at who you are and look at what you love the most, and ask yourself how you want to celebrate your day. You know, if it was going to be the best day ever, what are some of the things that you would want in it? And it doesn't have to be the traditional wedding things. You know, that may not be right for you.
Yeah.
So just kind of step off the path and the highway and forge your own path.
Right.
And do what you want.
There's one last thing that came up in our conversations, and that is, it is okay not to know everything about all of these things at the start of your wedding planning.
We often get into this mindset where we're unable to accept help, you know? We think we've got it all figured out, and one thing I know for sure is that we do not have everything figured out. That's the only thing I know for certain. And you know, we are doing this day in, day out. Wedding planners, florists, videographers. This is our bread and butter, you know? And I think you know, rewinding to the very beginning of your process and what's important to you, choosing vendors who also have a similar mindset and values is so important, because you know that they're also making those choices mindfully and they have your interests at heart as well. And voicing your concerns, you know, what's important to me, where are these flowers coming from? Be curious about, you know, what's going on and what the ingredients are in your wedding day.
Before we finish this episode, I wanted to just touch on what Natalia mentioned there and talk about our own wedding for a moment. Chelsea and I got married nearly 7 years ago, and it was just the best day. It felt so good to be surrounded by everyone we love, to celebrate with them, to acknowledge their support, and to mark our own journey. We'd been working in the wedding industry several years before that, and although we really focused on putting what mattered most to us at the heart of our planning, and we were conscious of reducing waste, having a sustainable wedding wasn't really on our radar. It wasn't something that was talked about a lot in the industry at the time, not around here anyway. And so as you're watching this series, keep in mind that what we recommend sometimes is what, with hindsight, we wish we'd done as well. But that said, as we became more aware of sustainable wedding practices, we went back and actually calculated the carbon footprint of our own wedding using a wedding footprint calculator, which, by the way, we will be talking about more in this series. When we input all our numbers, the food, the travel, the services, all of those things, we were happily surprised to find that we had a fairly sustainable wedding. And we realized we'd been able to pull this off for two reasons. First, we'd seen a lot of weddings before, and we knew which things were most meaningful to us and which things just weren't. And that helped us keep our values at the core of our planning. But second was our vendors. We chose vendors who we loved to work with and who we really trusted to do their thing. And Without really thinking about it or asking for it, our vendors naturally made things look and feel awesome in a sustainable way. And by trusting them with our vision, we ended up getting something better than we'd imagined. And so that's what our second episode is going to be all about, finding the people who can bring your vision to life in a sustainable way. So stick around to learn more about finding, choosing, and working with your vendors.